The car ahead of me paid for my coffee this morning, so I decided to return the favor by paying for the person behind me. I was then told that I was 8th person in a row to pay it forward. Any of you experience an unexpected pay it forward moment like that recently? My family does stuff like this every year. Sometimes it's meals at restaurants for a family. Other times it's paying for coffee or movie tickets for the person behind you. It's amazing when it starts a chain reaction like that. Another thing that I highly recommend is going to a 24 per hour place for dessert late on Christmas Eve. We usually go to Denny's, order dessert and drop a really big tip on the server. We usually give a big tip to the busboy, too. The joy in people's faces. It's amazing. I worked in an ice cream parlor and once had a guy give me a 20 and told me to pay for the next person. Next person was a grumpy old man that told me to frick off and that he can pay for himself. We grew up very poor, and as a child my mother always took a calculator and notepad to the store to see how much food we could afford. We made our cycle around the store, then parked our cart in a quiet corner while she ran the numbers to see what we had to put back. My mother would sometimes apologize to me with tears in her eyes as she put back juice or cookies or some other favorite of mine, and I would always try to act like I wasn't disappointed. It's okay, mama, we'll have juice next time. By the time I was a teenager, we were in a much better financial situation. One day we were in line at the grocery store and there was a young mother behind us. I wasn't paying attention, but my mother overheard something that let her know this woman was struggling just like we had. When my mother wrote out the check to pay for our groceries, people used to do this, youngins. She handed the grocer a second check with a note that she was paying for her groceries as well. The other day a friend of mine texted me, asking if I had any spare keyboards he could have. I said sure. He asked how much, and I told him to pay it forward. He didn't know what I meant, so I sent him the Wikipedia article on the phrase. He didn't understand that either, so I just asked for $5. Teach the innocent, make the stupid pay. I've done this before at a drive-thru. I was at a Little Caesars waiting for my pizza, and a truck pulls up behind me. It was later at night and he had his lights on. He turned his lights off. He didn't have to, but it was a nice gesture. So I paid for 2 hot and readies for him. You have a drive-thru pizza places. Oh, sincerely Iceland. Where would we be morally without Haley Joel Osment? Wonder if this ghost hangs out with Bruce Willis now. When I was younger and in grade school we had competitions to sell magazines and you get prizes at the end. You know the drill. Well, our small class of about 30 kids all lived in the same area, except for this one super rich douche. Anyways, a different school cleaned up all the houses we usually go to, so I was only able to sell one magazine after like 2 days of hunting. I find out later that everyone did crappy and the one guy who bought from me bought from everybody, like 20 magazines. He single-handedly gave all of us our soul sale. He ended up dying that year too. That went from wow to so really fast. Every Christmas my mom always gets my dad the same thing, an act of kindness. We are so fortunate to be able to afford nice presents for everyone in the family and more. Because of this, my dad always wants to pay it forward. So, my mom always helps someone financially. Last year she helped a local family by paying for both their kids to play football. They were playing already and were having trouble getting the payment, and giving them a healthy amount to live on due to the dad being fired. She also bought them pizza. My mom always puts her story of kindness in an envelope and puts it in the tree on Christmas morning. My dad is always happy. I know this will be buried, but I wanted to share. He was inspired by a similar story about a man buying lacrosse gear for a less fortunate team. It would be cool if someone found it. I live in North Jersey. I was on the parkway headed to work to the Garden State Plaza and coming up to a toll booth. I don't use EZ Pass, so I got into a cash lane. As I approached it, the lady operating the booth told me the car in front of you had already paid for me. Feeling so fortunate, I gave the lady $3 and said this is for the next 2. Have a pleasant day. This only made me hope that this pay it forward chain of gratitude just continued. This almost makes me want to get rid of my EZ Pass. Actually, that's a lie. I love that baby, especially the Express EZ Pass lanes. I worked in retail while I was in college. The place I worked at often had 15-20% discount coupons and dollar off coupons that were sent to customers who held the in-store charge credit cards. I worked at Kohl's. During the Christmas shopping season last year, one of the customers who had finished with their transaction asked if they were allowed to hold on to their coupon they just used. I replied that they were, and the customer turned around and handed it to the person behind her. Now the people who had received it looked really thankful, and after they had finished with their transaction, they too in return passed it on to the people behind them. This went on for about 45 minutes to an hour. During one of the busiest times of day. You gotta remember it was during the holidays. School was out, and there were always long lines at the register, so a good chunk of people managed to get 20% off their transaction. I hate freaking working during this time of year. The store is crowded. There are more people looking for assistance than there are workers. Anyone who's worked a few days before Christmas knows what it's like. It's chaos. It slightly restored my faith about working in retail. Truly a good sight to see. That is fantastic. Again, I never even thought of doing that. I didn't even know you could keep coupons, haha. Best night ever at the bar this past Wednesday. It was crowded cause everyone was back in town with their friends and just getting hammered and having a good time, and I went to get some more drinks and for everyone, and I was standing at the bar waiting for the bartender who was slaving away and started talking with the random guy beside me. Next thing you know he offers to buy my drink, and when I tell him I can't let him do that cause I am buying for a crap ton of folks, he tells me it's not a problem. Don't worry, he insists. So I of course being in good spirit let him, and then after to buy the next round. Well, when I go to do so, I find out some other guy already did so cause he overheard our conversation take place, and then one of the bartenders pulls us aside and tells me and my new buddy that they now have no clue whose cards to charge anymore cause everyone is buying drinks for each other and not themselves anymore, and all of the tabs were left open and the buyers aren't the drinkers, and everyone is confused as to who order what for who, and there are multiple orders and people arguing on who turn it is to buy. The bartender said about 12 different people have bought drinks for other people groups now at that time, all because of the simple generosity that was first shown. While working as a barista at Borders, RIP, I had a little girl come up and order a mocha. I make it for her and hand it to her. She has an odd, disappointed look on her face, but she leaves with it anyway. She comes back with mom 5 minutes later, who explains that she wanted a mocha frappe. Totally different. Now, usually when someone just orders the wrong thing I basically say tough titties, because that's what the pictures and explanations on the board are for, as well as opening your mouth and asking if you don't know. But she was a little girl, and I felt sorry for her. I was having a crappy day, so it annoyed me more than anything, but I felt bad enough to make her a new one. She came back later and gave me a $3 tip. It was sweet, and obviously money her mom had given her, which she could have spent on a lot of better things. It made me smile and be a lot less bitter that day. Years later, went through a Starbucks drive-thru, went to pay and realized I had lost my wallet. The barista let me keep the drink anyway. Went and found the wallet, came back and gave her a $5 tip. I don't think she expected to ever see me again. She was just being nice. Tip forwarding. Feels good. This actually happened 2 weeks ago. I walked out to my car and noticed there was an iPad underneath the tire, like, directly underneath it. So, I take it out and there aren't any scratches or cracks and it works perfectly. I go into their email and Facebook and send them a message saying, "Hi, my name is Sam Harrison 21 and I found your iPad. Here's my number. Give me a call." She called 30 minutes later and insisted that she give me a $100 reward. And then I felt guilty. Why should I accept $100 for just being a decent human being? So, I told her that if she really wants to get rid of $100, I would rather her donate it to the Jimmy Fund, since my best friend just went through cancer and was helped out by them. It turns out this woman was a breast cancer survivor and was helped out by Dana-Farber, who owns the Jimmy Fund. $100 was donated in my name. TLDR. Returned an iPad back to its owner and got $100 to the Jimmy Fund in response. This isn't so much pay it forward, but I buy the homeless dude where I work a soda each day when I buy mine for lunch. We don't talk but sit on back-to-back park benches. Sometimes I bring crackers or a granola bar. I noticed one day after I handed him his soda that another park bench regular walked up with a sandwich and thunked it down. With a few more pitching in, at least one decent homeless dude will get fed daily. That's beautiful. Sometimes I love people. Unfortunately just a video game, but still counts. I used to play Ultima Online a ton, but quit a long time ago for WoW. I decided to get back into the game on UO Gamers, and I leveled a tamer. I spent 3 days trying to tame a nightmare, until some guy came along, gave me a house, 2 mares, and a dragon to bond. A few weeks later I saw a new guy also playing, so did the same exact thing for him. Since I had went and found a better house, I gave him the one that had been given to me, along with 2 mares and a dragon, and he was incredibly happy. Felt good, especially since I had just been in his position a few weeks ago. I had a guildmate in WoW. He was probably late 50s, early 60s real age, and got bored hanging out with all the kids. He would go out to Goldshare and hand out bags to people he knew were actual new players. He always told me bags were the most important thing to a new player, even more so than gold armor weapons. In Naples, Italy, there's a tradition called caffè sospiso. Basically when people get a coffee, sometimes they order a caffè sospiso, paying for 2 coffees. If later someone who has no money gets in the bar, he can ask if there's a caffè sospiso and have a coffee for free. I work at McDonald's, and I had it once where 10 cars paid for each other, then the person who had like a $15 order had theirs paid for. They didn't pay for the person after them, whose order was about $2. I was so disappointed. I was at a Dunkin' Donuts once, when I overheard the cashier tell the girl in front that her card was declined. I told her to take the coffee and donut on me. She started to argue and I just said chill, it happens. She just nodded, smiled, said thanks and left. I went back to that Dunkin' hoping I'd run into her again. Not that I wanted recognition or anything. She was pretty cute. So here is my pay it forward moment courtesy of the United States court system. I got a speeding ticket about 3 years ago that I didn't pay on time and was assessed a fine on behalf of my own idiocy. The speeding ticket was about $390 and the assessment was about $300. So I went to court to fight the good fight, knowing it had been so long. I was pretty sure that the police officer who pulled me over wouldn't be around to prosecute me, and I was right. So I approach the bench and the judge tells me that I cannot be charged if there is no one to fight the initial judgment. That equals no payment on the initial ticket. Now, being me, I consider pleading guilty regardless because I feel it's my ineptitude that caused this in the first place. I don't do that because, well, that's very stupid. Instead, I just yes, Your Honor, and no, Your Honor until the cows come home. He tells me there is nothing he can do about the civil assessment, which means I still pay $300, and I'm completely cool with that cause I've caused the court so much trouble with it. Long story short, I walk out of the courtroom to process the remaining debt that I owe. I fill out the paperwork with 2 very nice women and prepare myself for the inevitability that I will pay the full civil assessment. I walk to the counter and ask to be put on a payment plan. She replies with, "You don't owe us anything. The judge waived your assessment." I about crapped myself and started crying. He just said there was nothing he could do, and yet, he did whatever he did and I paid nothing. I walked out of the courthouse smiling like my crap didn't stink, and a random person decided to comment on my appearance. "You won, didn't you?" Me, yeah, I did. I guessed it. No one walks out of here smiling like you unless they won. Me, yeah, it's time to pay it forward. I tipped the next person I saw $20 on a $3 bill. I tipped the next person I saw $20 on a $3 bill. The $3 bill was fake. I do this at a Starbucks drive-thru in the Seattle area most Friday nights as I pick up 6+ coffee orders for game night. I usually end up paying for 3-4 orders until I leave the window with my order. It may not be much, but maybe it brightens their day after waiting a bit longer in line. I hope that I've started many similar chains on these days. Someone paid my toll for the Golden Gate Bridge on Friday night. I still feel guilty for not immediately thinking of paying it forward. Nah, don't feel guilty. You can always continue the chain. Maybe one of us will be on the receiving end this week. My wife did this and she said the lady almost killed someone in traffic trying to catch up and thank her. Moral: being nice doesn't pay much. I was at my senior prom dinner and when we went to go pay the bill, the waiter told us that someone else had paid for it. We eventually figured out that it was the old couple next to us. We tried to give them back their money and they refused. They told us about their senior prom night and they couldn't afford to go out to a nice restaurant and told all of us to pay it forward when we get the opportunity in the future. Or, that is very sweet, : I was doing last minute holiday shopping at a grocery store last year. The only lane open had 20+ people waiting. When I finally check out, my card declined. I had to call the bank in front of everyone since my stuff was already bagged and I knew I had money. I could feel the whole place cringe for me. Had a stupid auto debit occur and threw my budget off. But this lady overhears me while I'm taking things back out of my cart and offers to pay the difference. Given the amount of time everyone was waiting and to spare further embarrassment, I accepted and gave her a big ol' hug. Everyone looked pretty happy after that. She basically paid for my Christmas ham and I'll never forget how humbled I was. Reminds me I need to start paying it forward around this time of year. I once picked up a pack of cigarettes that someone didn't finish. There were about 6 or 7 left in the pack and a guy on the bus asked to buy one off me. I ended up giving him the pack for free. Later on the bus ride I noticed he gave one to someone who was trying to buy one off of him. I am always afraid that I'm going to get into one of those Starbucks pay it forward chains and I will wreck it because the car behind me will be buying coffee and pastries for the whole office and I only have enough money for my cup of coffee. Break the chain today, start anew tomorrow. I was buying like $1.25 in gas, all the cash I had, as I was driving 20 minutes away to get my paycheck. Start pumping gas after I prepay and it goes up to like $10 before the pump cuts off. Since I was confused and didn't want to drive away without paying for gas, I went back into the gas station and turns out the person in line right behind me paid for my extra gas and never even told me. Made my day. I think my dad has done that a few times. I can't believe I didn't think about that either. And this is definitely something that borderlines on essential for many Americans, since we lack quality public transportation virtually everywhere except a few bustling metropolises. Great idea, : This is society at work. It's the idea of helping our fellow man, however little or much, the sharing of the burden. I'm not naive enough to think we're all going to sing Kumbaya around the tree together, but it's also not meaningless. Somebody made my day a little better, I make somebody else's day a little better. The cumulative effect propagates throughout the community in big ways and small. There's no telling what something like this will inspire in someone who has the power to make a lot of people's day a lot better, if only for a little nudge that pushes them over the threshold. Being nice is its own reward. Yes, actually, this happened last week at Black Rock Coffee. The barista said I was the 12th person to pay it forward. Feels good, man. JPG. I haven't had anyone pay it forward for me, but I really believe in the concept. My daughter and I were in a Wendy's the other day and the lady ahead of us with her 2 small kids mentioned to the cashier that they were not getting drinks or fries because they were saving for a trip to Oregon. So I bought those tykes a couple of Frosties to let them know that there are good people in the world. I didn't say anything other than to say I overheard and wanted them to have a treat on my daughter whose idea it was. This isn't entirely paying it forward, but it's a really sweet story. I work at a small toy store, and Christmas is a crazy time. One little girl, probably 5 years old, and her exceptionally sweet mom were looking around. The little girl was making a wish list of toys in the store. The mom said, "I know you think a lot of things in here are cool, but just remember, you'll only get one thing on the list. I don't have the money to get it all." The little girl was totally understanding and said something like, "I don't really need any of them, mommy." The mom looked completely heartbroken, and also so grateful for a daughter who wasn't throwing a tantrum like every other kid in the store. This adorable, ancient man who was in the store asked me to get the mom's name and phone number and tell her we were having a raffle, so I did. He then paid for every single item on the little girl's list, along with the teddy bear he picked out. We called the mother the next day to let her know, and she was completely overwhelmed. She came in to pick up the gifts, was so excited and relieved, and left us a note written by her daughter to give the man if he came back in. I think it's probably the nicest thing I've seen happen for absolutely no recognition. I once dropped my wallet in an Armenian bus station. I didn't notice I lost it until I got home and chalked it up to a loss. I had about $40 of Armenian dram in there and no real important card, so I wasn't sweating it. I get a call the next day from my boss who told me they had my wallet. Some nice old grandmother found the wallet and searched through it, finding the only identification I had written in Armenian, and called the number and went and dropped the wallet off at the office. I got the lady's phone number from the guard who got my wallet back from her. Everything was untouched. So I called her to thank her and asked where she lived. I wanted to bring a box of chocolates over. She kept trying to shoot me down, saying it was what anyone would do, until I told her that in America normally people would take the cash and dump the wallet. She finally agreed to let me bring her some candy, so I went there to thank her with it, and she invited me in for tea. We started chatting and her husband came home. He was surprised an American was there and shocked I spoke Armenian. So he pulled out a bottle of vodka and told me to get drunk with him and listen to his old army stories. Not a bad return for a box of chocolates, I think. Just the other day I went down to our local fishing hole with 2 friends and a casting net. We got a couple shrimp, but were obviously struggling. These guys had all the gear and were pulling lots of crabs out of the water. They stopped crabbing, gave us their lines, bait, net, and even their beer, and let us go to town. We thanked them for their hospitality, and one of them said just paying it forward. It was really cool, and we brought home 20 crabs for the day after Thanksgiving feast. Inspired the film 101 Reykjavik, in which the protagonist fills up lots of other people's parking meters and gets arrested for it. My friend and I decided to do the same whilst we were briefly living in Iceland. We filled up about 15 meters. We are from UK and weren't really sure how they worked, before realizing it was Sunday and all the parking on the street was free. I worked at Starbucks for 4 years and this happened frequently. It always ended once we either ran out of cars or the car behind was way too expensive. 6-8 drinks. As a side note, I made sure never to suggest they pay it forward. I'd let them know it was paid for by the car in front and let them come up with the idea themselves. It's an awkward situation to be in if they don't want to and you suggest it. I was going to Cabo for my senior trip a few years ago. I woke up the day before to go to work and stopped at Jack in the Box for breakfast. I was in such a good mood I paid for the man behind me. It ended up making the local news that night because it continued for a while. Felt pretty neat to start something like that. Once in college I got a flat tire on the way back from my family reunion. I got the spare on and got the car to a tire shop, and they told me it would be $120. I was on the phone with my dad telling him I didn't have the money to fix it, close to tears, and he said when the bill came to hand the phone to the cashier and he'd pay over the phone. But when the bill came, a random person in the waiting room had paid for it and wrote a note that said, "I remember what it's like to be young and broke. Have a blessed day." I will never forget how important the kindness of a stranger can be. I worked in a cafe once and this woman came in and gave Tonys, $2 coins for all of you non-Canadians, attached to her business card and asked us to pay for people's coffee and give them her business card. My supervisor took all the Tonys off and put them in our tip bag instead. She said the generosity of it was ruined because it wasn't anonymous. I agree. It's almost like everyone bought their own coffee, and the guy who started the chain really only paid for the final person ordering a coffee and not paying. Yeah, if you look at it that way, or you could look at it as everybody in front of you passed up their free coffee chance so that they could make the next guy's free instead. I don't know if this is a chain or just a single act, but I recently went to the ER. It turns out I have Crohn's disease with crippling stomach pain. I couldn't stand and even breathing was starting to become painful. On this particular night, the ER was fairly crowded. I got there at 11 PM and by 3 AM still hadn't been seen. A nurse comes to the waiting area and calls a man. I have no idea who this man was and I still don't know who he is. The man gets up and says something to the nurse. As it would turn out, he told her to let me go before him because he felt that I was in more pain than he was. I still haven't paid it forward though. I don't exactly go to the ER often, so it isn't like I can do the same thing. How do you guys think I should pay it forward? Let someone go in front of you in any line. It doesn't have to be there. Maybe you see a mother with impatient children standing in line to pay, or a man with 2 items to buy versus you're 15. Let them go before you to the cashier. A few weeks ago I was at Max's drive-thru for breakfast. Rolled up to pay only to be greeted by the lady ahead paid. Pardon, I ask. The lady ahead paid. She does it every day. Was quite blown away that a person would spread this little bit of happiness on a daily basis. A co-worker had a customer whose debit card wasn't working. The lady behind him took care of his $22.60 grocery bill. But for me the best is a woman who had 5 kids. They are all hers. Have seen her a million times. But that day she was on a mission to show her kids a lesson. Spent $100 on groceries during our half-price sale and donated every last bag to the food bank for the church. I was at a drag strip with my dad and I went to go get some lunch for the 2 of us. There was this little kid at the concession stand and he really wanted this one ice cream sandwich, but he was short 50 cents and didn't look happy at all, so I gave him the 50 cents and his eyes lit up. After he left, a man behind me told me to get whatever I wanted and he would pay for it because it was really nice what I did, even though it was only 50 cents. Had a table donate $20 to another table's check just because it was the season. The people were more confused than elated. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.